All right, one second. This time I'm going to share my desktop instead because it's easier to show things. Can you still see the slides?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so some real quick WordPress news and events. Kind of the big topic is, what is it, 8 days from now, there's a major WordPress release coming out, WordPress 5.8. It comes out on July 20th. And one of the big things it introduces is this concept of full site editing. So this is the beginning of that. And if you don't know what full site editing is, we'll talk a little bit about it as we've gone through this project of what we're building. But really the idea is that full site editing allows you to use some of the things we're going to show today, the blocks, for example, throughout your site. So that means things like the headers, the footers, etc. You can start building those out using blocks, from WordPress, as opposed to using other tools or relying on your template to expose those things to you. So that's just one example of what full site editing lets you do. So WordPress 5.8. Some of the building blocks of full site editing are going to be available in that release. There's a lot of other changes in there. There's some new theme blocks. The query block is a really powerful and exciting block that gets introduced. So in the past, in order to manipulate the WordPress query, you'd have to write code and do that in PHP code. Now there's going to be a block that allows you to do some of that manipulation. There's this block pattern directory, which is very interesting, about this idea of sharing block patterns among anybody. I'm curious to see how that works. So, you have the idea today, if you go to the repository, you can find themes, you can find plugins. Well, now the idea is having some sort of pattern directory. And I'm not even familiar with exactly how that's being implemented. So there's a lot of it. Just the summary of the slide is there's a lot of features coming out in 5.8. And in fact, Peter and I talked and said, it's really worth doing a deep dive into WordPress 5.8. So that's what we're planning on doing next month. We're going to take a little bit of a break from our building a website together discussion, and we're going to just spend all of our next meetup going through the features in WordPress 5.8. And then hopefully at some point, as we continue to build out this site, this practice site, we'll use some of those new features where appropriate, and either go back or going forward, start showing you those new features in action. So it's I think an exciting thing coming up. Any other words, Peter, on 5.8? Anything else that you want to?
No, not on 5.8. There are a couple of events, but yeah, we'll have plenty to talk about next time.
Yeah. All right. So speaking of events, sorry, my thing always clicks off. Another just big one to mention to people is Local. So Local by Flywheel is a tool that we talked about in the very beginning of this series of building a site. So Local by Flywheel is a free tool that allows you to install and build and run WordPress websites on your computer without needing a website host. It's a really neat tool. There's been other tools in the past that let you do this, but Local is probably one of the best ones in terms of ease of use and features. So in the past, Local, because Flywheel is a hosting company, they had a professional version of Local that really integrated with Flywheel. So they had a paid version of Local Pro, separate from the free one. But now they've decided, hey, let's just give all the pro features to everyone. So I won't go into all of these features. You can take a look at localwp.com or do a search of Local Pro. There's some neat features in here, like live links with one. So for example, you could create a site locally on your computer, but as long as the site is running, you can give somebody a link to that site. And again, it has security permissions and all that. So someone else on the internet can connect to that site running on your computer. So it's another way to kind of demo things and have people work on something together. So a lot of new features to that. It's free. Check it out. I think you have to install the latest version of Local. I forget what the number is to get these features as well. And finally, we talked about this last month. WordCamp Europe, it's come and gone. That was June 7th through the 9th. But all the sessions now are available on YouTube. So if you do a search for WordCamp Europe, you can find all the recorded sessions on there. They still haven't broken them apart into topics. So they're recorded by days. You can fast forward through them and find what topic you're interested in. So take a look at that. Another great resource to take advantage of. All right, tool and plugin spotlight. Peter, this is yours.
Okay, yeah, let me grab the screen.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Sure.
Yes. I'm new in Meetup and I'm new in this group too. My name is Shifred. I'm from Pennsylvania. So I came in this group because I was trying to build my own social media website. You know, a little bit like Facebook, but with a different public, like for people who have business ideas.
Hmm.
So, but at the same time, socializing, but at the same time, socializing not for hanging out, showing pictures, like for fun, like Facebook do, but for socializing with people, with other people who have business ideas, almost similar, like the same thing like you guys are doing. So, but I was doing it with WordPress. So I bought Pipso so I can have the plugins I needed so I can have the functionalities. I don't know if you guys have heard about Pipso.
No.
I only know about it from, I think it was an AppSumo deal, if I remember correctly. And I know what it's trying to do, but I don't have direct experience with it.
Okay.
Yeah, there are a number of, I know there are communities out there that where you can work with. That's what's great about the WordPress community. You can find a forum or a Slack channel or a Facebook page that gets into detail on a lot of these things, especially if you have a specific product and kind of work with the people who know it more. I know other people have used it. There's a few other ones, including like BuddyPress is, there's a
Okay.
cost to it, but
I've
that's what,
I've body pressed.
yeah.
But I was trying a video on YouTube making the difference between Pipso and body press. I was going to take body press, but the guy who make the video gave more support for Pipso. So I say, okay, let me take Pipso.
Yeah.
Yeah, but now I'm trying to do it. Now I'm stuck. There are many things that are going bad meanwhile, because I'm not a I'm I don't have a knowledge about IT. This is something I'm trying to do by myself. Right.
I guess, Shepard, maybe what I would suggest is join our Facebook group on there, because there's a lot of people on our group. We're up to a couple hundred people or so now. There might be people who have more experience with that plugin. So post the question on our Facebook group, kind of see what, maybe you'll get some response from people who are
Yeah.
more familiar with it, who can help you out with it.
That was exactly my purpose.
Yeah, I'd say try that out, because I don't have experience and Peter does. And of course, that's one of the things about WordPress, for better or for worse, is a lot of these plugins that are very specific or very detailed, but if we don't, people not on here having experience with that, we can't really help you out too much, unfortunately.
Yes, because it's gonna be, Facebook is free, but mine is gonna be a paid membership, because not only the business ideas for people, at the same time giving them a space to give their business, like housing their ideas, but also giving them their tips how they can go up to make it from something or your can be materialized. So thank you for this idea that you just gave me.
Okay.
I would like to have people to create a team with me so we can make it happen. But as you said, go to your Facebook
post
group.
Post on the Facebook group. We have a lot of people there. Maybe they have some familiarity with that.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll appreciate it.
Sure.
Very good. Okay, Ray, what do you see on your screen, or what is?
I see Google.
A big Google. Okay, so two events coming up just to complete it that I like. July 17th and 18th is the Santa Clarita WordCamp. They do everything online. They do a good job. If you have an interest in accessibility, that is one area where the Santa Clarita people really focus on. So there's definitely going to be sessions about accessibility, and hopefully we'll have our own here. Another one coming up that's a great one that I really like is WordFest Live. That's July 23rd and 24th. These are both free. It's just signing up. This one's done out of the UK, and it's the Big Orange Heart people, and they've developed their own interface. In fact, they're going to be marketing it or giving it away or doing it as a plugin at some point for doing online events where they've done a great job even replicating the side rooms and the hallway chats and things like that, I think, better than anybody else. So these are two that I definitely recommend. We'll share. So our tip is Google. Can you believe it? You know, what's a great tip to share sort of the details on? And, you know, one of the things that we all use, but you know, are we using it to its fullest extent, is Google. Now we're not going to do a full Google power user demo here, but I just wanted to show you you know, a couple of things just to make sure that, you know, we know, or we can start experimenting with Google itself if you haven't already. So one of the things is, you know, I'll just do, right, our website's built on pet adoptions, and when you look at Google, we have the whole things that you see at the top where you've got, you know, your sections of images. So basically when you come into Google, of course you're getting all, but if you want to do your image search, you know, most of us know these types of things where we can look at specific details in Google. One of the things that I use a lot are the simple thing in terms of tools. When you do a search, you get overwhelmed by a lot of things. Sometimes I want to know, well, what's going on in the last month? I don't want to look 5 years back, especially if you're looking at, you know, WordPress plugins, block editor, right? And you say, well, I want to see things that are being posted now. So, you know, this idea that you can go to tools and pick your time is a great way of kind of honing in on specific information versus being overwhelmed. You know, it may seem obvious, but a lot of times people, you know, they don't know that those tools are there. In Google, another thing that you can look at in the bottom right corner, if you go to settings and advanced search, and there's different ways to get to advanced search. This is a way that you can get into kind of really specific things, all these words, the exact words or phrases, any of these words. And there are ways of doing this. In fact, they show you right here to do this in the search box, you know, to use the exact words, rat terrier, you put it in quotes, rat terrier. If you don't want to see, like, I'll do WordPress editor, and then I will say, in this case, you know, none of these words, I will say minus Elementor, you know, because I'm not interested in the Elementor page builder for me. You know, a lot of people are, and they might search for those. But if you definitely want to see only that, you might do in quotes Elementor. So those are some ways that you could do those types of searches right in the toolbar, or use the advanced search, and your results will leave things out. And then a couple more things, and we can you know, you can look more into it, but there's these ways of doing searches, like if you do site : and then your site, and say we did I hope you don't mind this, it's CT Web Geek, right? Geek.com. If I do site : and then a website address, what this does is it's showing me basically what Google has stored for me, you know, indexed for me. And this is a really interesting way that you can quickly go in and see what Google sees about your site, including maybe you have a hidden page that pops up, or maybe nothing pops up, and you're going to want to know why. There's a lot of ways you can look into what Google is doing, but this is a kind of a really simple, neat way. And then if you knew, you know, a specific thing that you wanted to see on it, nonprofit, I don't even know if you have a page, you know, you could do something like that where, okay, you know, CT Web Geek, maybe there's not a oh, there it is, right? That's your home page. So one page came up with that. So that's a neat thing to do. And then two more really quickly. If we did link instead of site, it is not necessarily a, you know, show you every backlink thing, but it gives you an idea of what links to that site, that page. Of course, you have your internal links, but then find local Newington, you've got a link, and it's looking also at your domain name. If you click on that, you'll see the link. So this is a neat way of seeing, you know, what links to you. And then another thing, sometimes I use this. Say you wanted to do WordPress Block Editor. I don't even know if there's something like this, but then if you do file type : and then a specific file type, and a lot of times I might be, say I'm looking for a PDF, or I'm looking for, you know, an SVG, which is a type of image file, and all, but say I do PDF. Now your search is showing you just PDFs as the result. So you can look at the this WordPress Block Editor link. This is a PDF file. and there's reasons, you know, sometimes if I'm looking for logos or images or specific types of documents, I might look for a specific file type versus getting overwhelmed with everything. So Google has a lot of ways that you can do some very powerful searches just in the search bar itself, or like I said, if you look under settings in your advanced search, you have a lot of options within Google itself. Any questions or anybody? We got any Google Power users? All right.
I think it's great tips. I use the file type one all the time, and you said the other one just to see if your site was indexed properly. That's a good one to do. And sometimes, yeah, that really uncovers, like I said, people have a no index on a page, and they're like, "How come I'm not getting this showing up?" It's like, well, you know, now you got to go back to your sitemap and see what's going on. So.
Yeah, you know, and then you get into some of the things that are specific to a specific thing. Say you're doing an image search, and now when you go into the tools that you see for images are different than text, and you can start looking for size. You know, maybe you're looking for a color that kind of matches yours, and you get into all kinds of details. So Google has done a lot of slicing and dicing and really granular types of searches, and you know, making all of these tools available. You know, what green puppy and kitten photo was posted in the last 24 hours, and there you go. So yeah.
So Peter, a
Yeah.
question in that search, like you just did puppies and kittens for images. Can you add something to do that? Say I only look at free images versus every image.
You can do, well, there's a couple of ways. One way is if you want to do, you know, free. Let me make sure, and then you also want to make sure that you're not limiting yourself. It's got any time. One of the things for images is we have there's even a usage rights in Google. So Creative Commons license, that'll give you a little bit more into the royalty free area. So to some degree, if you wanted to really do, you know, we've got other ways of doing it through the Creative Commons search, through Unsplash, or those types of tools. But yeah, there are a lot of ways that you can further refine that that search.
Thank you.
Does that help?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great.
I learned something new. I had no idea there was that Creative Commons.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot. There really is. Okay.
All right.
Where you want to take? Are you taking?
Yeah. Let me grab the screen. All right, so let's jump into, again, I'll do desktop again. I'll show you desktop because I'll probably be bouncing around a little bit here. Do you see the slide? I'm not going to do full screen because, like I said, I like to bounce around a little bit. So again, welcome everyone to our topic. This is part 3 of our Let's Build the Site Together series. I guess we're into a series now, and using my poor house building analogy, I guess we're in the drywall phase. Or somewhere in there, I don't know. We're beyond the frame. The foundation's been laid. So
there you go.
So here's our agenda, kind of following what we did for the other 2 parts. Peter and I will give introductions of ourselves quickly. We'll do a short recap of the first 2 parts. So if you've missed those, you should still be able to follow along with what we're doing. And then the first thing I'm going to do is do some finishing touches on the header. So last time in part 2, we built out the header together on the website, but there were some things I left off just for the sake of time. So I'll go back and finish those off. Peter as well will also finish off the hero section a little bit, and we'll kind of show what those finishing touches are and kind of why we want to do them. And then we're going to build some new sections here. So I'm going to build one that's called the 50-50 section. I'll show you what that looks like a little bit later, and I'm going to do that the hard way. and you'll see, you know, I'll build it. I'm going to build it as natively as I can, and then Peter's going to build the blurb section, which is a more complicated section, and I think he's going to show a more elegant way to do that. So it'll be, I think, it's a bit of a fun compare and contrast between how you build different parts of your website. And then, you know, I say Q&A time here at the end, but obviously Q&A anytime as we're going through it. We certainly welcome feedback and questions as we're going through this. And then we'll talk about what's coming up next. So we're not going to finish this project obviously in part 3. As I said, we're going to take a break next month, as a matter of fact. But then part 4, we're going to cover another big topic, and we'll talk about that at the end. So that's going to be related to our project. So that's our agenda for tonight. So real quick, myself, I'm Ray, again, from if you're here for the first time, welcome. I've been in IT for 25 plus years. I was a software developer, architect for some larger corporations for most of my career. I've been using WordPress probably 4+ years, maybe close on 5 years now. Really, where I first got started was helping out with nonprofits too. That was like how I built my experience learning WordPress. So, and Peter is very involved in nonprofits as well. So I think, it's a great way to learn WordPress. We talked about this before. So if you're new to WordPress, you want to help out, you want to build your skills, I'd highly suggest that as a way of getting yourself some more experience in WordPress. They're always looking for people to help out. I'm self-employed, so I have a website business myself, consulting business. I live in Newington, Connecticut, not too far from Hartford. Married, no kids. We have one crazy old cat, and I am a geek. Peter.
Hey, I'm Peter. I live in South Windsor, Connecticut. I grew up in Newington, where Ray lives, and I've been using technology from marketing and communications for pretty darn long time. I've been working in WordPress for about 10 years now, I think. I should probably get the exact time on that, but I'm all about, taking data and presenting it. So WordPress is a great outlet for me for that. I work at the Hartford Current and other organizations doing a lot of this web development. I'm self-taught in a whole lot of things. As I said, I do live in South Windsor. I'm married. I have 2 adult children, and I can't convince them to do web development yet. So what are you going to do?
It's the future. Tell them it's the future.
Yeah.
All right. So let's do a quick recap of parts 1 and 2. So what did we cover on those parts? So it's good to always go back to, I think, the big picture, especially. And if you're joining us for the first time or not. So our goal of this series was to build a moderately complex website from scratch, like literally from scratch. We built the environment, we installed the themes, everything. So there was no magic. And using, again, free plugins, free tools when needed. In fact, I can pretty much guarantee this whole project, we're not going to do any paid plugins. And we're trying to minimize the use of plugins in general. I'll talk about that in a second. So, our goal is in this series, each one is building upon prior ones. So when we're done, whenever we are done, we should have a fully functioning website that you can see, and hopefully you've seen the evolution of as we built it out. So we're spending time here. Again, here we are, part 3. We're still working on the homepage. But the reason for that is we want to slow it down and show you the best practices versus quick and dirty solutions. And you'll see that tonight. I think tonight will be a great example of that. So as I said earlier, for people before you join the call, there's 100 different ways to do anything in WordPress. So we're not going to show you all 100 different ways, but we're going to show you some best practices where possible and explain our rationale behind certain choices that we're making. So we think that the best way for you to get the most out of these sessions is by following along, and obviously not following along right now, but go back and watch the recordings. Try to build along with us. You don't have to build the entire site if that's too overwhelming, you don't have the time. Just try to build at least these sections that we're building, because I think being hands-on is going to give you so much more knowledge and experience and bring up better questions than just watching us build it. And again, we try to make this such an easier barrier to entry that you don't need to spend any money on hosting if you don't have money or the hosting available. We talked about the tool local. If you go back to part 1, we show you how to set up a local environment, so you don't need to pay for hosting at all. So the project, again, we wanted to focus, not just build anything. Our real focus here is, because as I said, Peter and I both worked with nonprofits. We decided to come up with this fictional nonprofit. It's an animal rescue called cleverly WP Animal Rescue. And we have some goals. Again, just like any other website, our goals for this fictional nonprofit are, to provide education on their work, to accept donations for their cause, to facilitate pet adoptions, and that's something we'll talk about more in our upcoming parts, and recruiting volunteers. So these are just kind of common goals that any organization would have. So our website is going to try to meet these goals. So even though we're building something very specific, an animal rescue, we don't expect everyone here to be building an animal rescue in their day-to-day lives, but hopefully the things that we're showing you, the tools, techniques, etc., are applicable to any type of website. And here's our inspiration. Again, we didn't want to start with a blank page, but we're not copying. We're just using this, and we talked about this in part 1 about finding different sources of inspiration. But ours is this this sample site, which is also for a nonprofit. And let me just make sure I have it up again. Let's close that up. So it's this site, and we send out a link to this, and we share all of our resources as well as what we're building. So this is a sample site, and as you can see, it has nothing to do with an animal shelter. But as we're building through the homepage, we're building through the site, we're using this as our design inspiration for parts of the site. And we're going to deviate from this, at various times. But for now, this is kind of our starting point. Peter, anything else you want to add to like our part 1, part 2, or our overall goals?
No, I think that's accurate for that covering. I think one of the things that we'll keep talking about is, and we already have a few times, in the multiple ways of doing things, the things that you discover as you're going, and is there a different way or a better way, and things like that. Again, the challenges, or as you're watching this, and as we build, and as we've even done so far, is it's not meant to be all about do it exactly this way. I know a lot of online tutorials are literally do exactly this way, but then you're going down some very specific path. I would be very happy if folks really started understanding how things work and how they could do their own kind of experimentation on, and probably demonstrate some of that tonight.
Yeah. And so here's where we are on the site. So if people have been following along, initially, especially part 1, just to show that you could do it, I was building separate from Peter. I was building locally on my computer, which all of you are welcome to do as you're following along. And Peter was building on a test site, a demo site that is publicly available that you can take a look at. It's called build.hartfordwp.com. We'll send out the links to this as well later. Now that Peter and I are getting to this point of working together on a single page, we're both working on the live site as opposed to trying to trade code and all that. So tonight you'll see us both working on the same site at the same time. Obviously, we'll take turns when we're not bumping into each other. But here's what we've built so far from parts 1 and 2. So we have a site, we have a website up and running. We have a header with these links don't go anywhere right now because we haven't built these pages out. But if you recall from part 2, I built out the header, and then Peter built out this section, which we call the hero section. And it's kind of a common term with a couple of buttons. So that's what we built. That took us 2 months. Not really, but we got to this point with a lot of explanation. So here's where we are. This is our starting point for tonight. So I'm going to start off, again, hopefully not spending a lot of time in this, but the header, I'm going to explain, there's some leftover pieces that last time, believe it or not, we didn't get to. So some finishing touches that we'll need to do, and I'll dive into. So a couple quick things. Our demo site, our inspiration site has what's called a sticky header. So what a sticky header is, let me go back to it, is the name implies it's a header that doesn't move as you scroll up and down. So, not every site needs this, but sites that have a lot of content, it can be nice to have a sticky header. In our case, especially because our header has a call to action button, it's kind of good to keep that always present, again, from a desktop standpoint at least. Always have that kind of available and visible. So our site right now, you really can't see it here because we only have a short piece of content here, but our header is not sticky. So if we had a lot more content here, it would scroll to the top of the page and disappear. So that's the first thing I'm going to change to make that a sticky header. And then the second piece that I'm going to tackle is mobile styling. And we're not going to necessarily do this for every section we build. I think we'll have to figure out where it makes sense to, but I thought this might be a good one to show because it is important. So the menu that we currently have, the header that we currently have is not really properly done for mobile. So let me show you what I mean by that. So if we look at our page, and if I go to inspect, so again, I'm using Chrome. So if you right click on inspect, or you have to go to developer tools to turn this on, at this point, I can view on the left-hand side, I can change my view of what I'm seeing, and it's called the viewport. So I'm going to switch this over to pretend I'm looking at this on a mobile device. So let me switch to iPhone 10, for example. So forget about the hero piece. Peter will fix that. But for the header part, at least, right now, the way that this header is set up, it has what's called this typical hamburger icon that you see on a lot of sites for mobile. But if you click on it, you can see, first off, it doesn't have my call to action button. The styling looks a little bit different. It definitely does not look like, here's our sample site. If you look at this header on mobile, it looks pretty nice. It's just more, it's just brighter, it has a call to action button, etc. So I'm going to try to make ours look closer to this, not 100%, but just at least closer to that. So that's my goal of finishing touches for the header. And I'm going to try to do that in 15 minutes or less. So let's start with the easy part. Let's do the sticky header. So first thing I need to do, I'm already signed in as an admin. So on your sites, if you're following along, obviously you have to start up your site if you're running on local, or obviously get into the back end admin of your site. And remember, we're using if you're joining us for the first time, please go back and watch parts 1 and 2. But just a reminder, we're using the Kadence theme. It's a free theme for WordPress. So some of these things we're doing in Kadence. So if you're following, well, you should follow along with Kadence. Again, you're following with a different theme. This is a lot of things we do are not going to apply. So in Kadence, at least, if I go to appearance, and this, go to appearance, Kadence over here, all of these header properties I'm talking about can be accessed easily from this section. So this is just the way I'm going in. So header layout, I'm going to click on customize. And Kadence makes it very simple. One of the things I really like about Kadence is they have this nice header builder, and there's one similarly for footers. As we talk later about the future of WordPress with 5.8, this is where we talk about full site editing. But for now, we're using Kadence's built-in header footer editor. So one thing I can do, which is pretty simple, is here in Kadence, if I go to, it has an option for sticky header. Do I want to enable it? Right now it's set to no, so I want to say yes. And I have a couple choices here. So I can say the main row, which is the middle row, I believe is the main row, or the top 2 rows, or etc. So it gives you a lot more choice of what thing you want to make sticky, and that, depending on what you want to do. But just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to say yes to the whole header. So now you really can't see it because we don't have enough content there. But as we go through this, you'll see later that yes, it is. Now it's made this whole thing. So when I scroll down, that will remain on top. And obviously, I don't want a sticky header from mobile. Because you think about it from a mobile perspective, depending on your screen, you don't want half your screen always taken up by the header. So sticky header is something, at least in my opinion, is probably something you want to just do for desktop. All right, so just to save that, you click publish. That's done. That was one finishing touch. That's the easy one. Now let's get into the fun. So let's get into the mobile piece. So I've got my notes on the side because the mobile one takes a little bit more work. All right, so in Kadence, again, I get this header area. And this is neat about Kadence gives you this option to look at what your site looks like just by a click of a button. So if I say tablet or mobile, it's showing me, here's what my navigation is going to look like. The way Kadence has this set up too is that off this thing, the kind of widget over here, this item is your mobile navigation. So you can get your mobile settings by clicking on the little gear over here. Maybe not super intuitive, but the thought is these are off-campus elements that don't necessarily show up here, but it lets you control what you're seeing in the mobile menu. So anyway, so I'm going to go to mobile navigation, the gear for my settings. And now let's see. Now I've got to jump into my, let's see, design. All right, mobile navigation, design. All right, let me make sure I'm in the right spot. All right, well, let's start. Let's see if this is the right piece. I gotta make sure I got the right stuff going. So our colors to begin with. So what do we got for colors? Maybe I'll do font first. So our font, right now, our fonts are white for the initial color, and then on hover, it's not doing anything. And then our background has nothing, but I want to change our background to white. So let me try this first. And that's only doing that part. So 1 second here. I probably selected, see, I've got my notes here and I'm still trying to figure out how to get to the background, the whole background. 1 second. Go back again. Sorry, header. mobile navigation. Let me do this first, and then I think I have to change the overall piece as well. Oh, you know, it's the trigger. Sorry. Problem is, if I change these out of order, it's going to look a little strange. So let me change the so this trigger thing here. What this is controlling is the appearance of the hamburger icons. It also includes some of the background information too. So let me change that piece first. So right now our icon color is kind of this dull gray to begin with, the hamburger icon. It does let you change that if you want. We'll stick with the hamburger icon. That's what this is called. It looks like a hamburger. You can change it to 3 dots if you want, or other things. We'll keep it like this for now. But I'm going to change the color of that just to be, let's see, here's the initial color is gray, and then it switches to green. So I'm going to go with our color theme of it's going to start off as green, and then when you hover over it, we'll switch that over to our red. So as you can see, it's going to switch between the two. That's just one small thing. I'll switch that icon color. And now the navigation background. I think that's the piece I want. Let's see. So navigation background, that's this. I want this whole thing to be white. That didn't do it. Design. Let me try that again. Navigation, initial background, white. Drag drawer container. Design. Here we go. This, I think it's this one.
Yeah. There
we go. White. So this wasn't on purpose. This is me showing, though, that unfortunately some of these tools, even Kadence itself, and I'm not a Kadence expert either, as you can obviously see, there's a lot of different options you may have to go into to see, you know, what property you have to set to change something. So some of this isn't really intuitive, and that's where I'm hoping full site editing may help make things a little bit more intuitive. So again, if I back out to where I got to, you know, so I'm inside of the header background. So I'm here in the trigger. I've changed the header background to all white, and now you can't see my text, but I'll fix that in a minute. But the background set this whole piece behind me. So I've set that now to white. And I think I need one more thing in here, which is my close icon.
And Ray, real quick,
yep.
And for everybody, this happens to us every day in real life in a lot of cases, right? So especially if we, you know, I work in a couple of different themes, and the themes don't do things exactly the same way. And every once in a while, you have to do some searching for stuff, or go, oh yeah, that's right. In this one, there's a little settings wheel and a subsection kind of thing. So yeah. It's natural. And I guess the lesson or the thing to come away from is, don't get frustrated. You know, sometimes all of a sudden things will click and go, okay, that's there and all. So,
and some of it is having that context, like Peter was just saying too, like this thing, which not every theme behaves this way. This theme, it's kind of nice. It's granular in the sense that the actual menu up here is being treated separately than the container. So the container, in some sense, that's the pop-up. So that's where I've changed the background on that. But now I'm going to go and change the actual interior piece where the menu is. But one more thing here in the trigger, I think I need to change my close icon. No, I guess that's still, I'll find that other part too. I have another setting I need to change in a second. So let me go back now to mobile navigation and this design. So now if I go again to my colors, so first thing I want is my colors to be, so this is going to be the text color, I believe. Yeah, okay, that's good. So that's the text color. So my initial text color is black. I don't care about hover. I want it to, well, I guess I could. I can make it go from black to green, I guess. Mm-hmm. And then this one, active. Oh, I'm sorry. No, I want the green. I want green one to be active. So hover, I won't do anything. I'll get rid of that. And this is I don't think Kadence has always had this too, which kind of annoyed me in the beginning, a reset, which is pretty a basic thing, but the early versions I used, the Kadence didn't have that. You had to erase it yourself.
Yeah.
So let me go back to black. Here we go. So right now, all I've done is I've created the fonts now are black. But I also want to make these a little bit bolder too. So if you think about our sample here, this is a little bit bolder than ours. Ours is kind of a default font size. So I'm going to go switch the, here is my font. I want to leave the font alone, but I want to change the styling. So I'm going to go with, this is nice, Kadence shows you what these different things look like. I'm going to go with just like 600.
Yeah.
So 600 is going to make it look a little bit bolder. The thing's going to be black. So now we're slowly getting there. Let's see, what else do I need to do here? Collapse submenus, nope, that looks fine. That looks fine. At some point, I'm missing my close icon. I've got to find where that is. So that is under my, let's see, under design, nope. Under trigger, perhaps again. Nope.
Was it the drawer container options?
Drawer container options.
We call it a drawer.
Oh, here we go. Design trigger. So my close, again, yeah, back to this. I'm getting my head around this. So this idea is this trigger is what brought up that menu. So I want, believe it or not, there's a little hamburger icon, or there's an X up here, which you can't see. So if I make that green, or let's make it green. There it is.
Yeah.
So I had to make it appear. So I had to change that icon. So let me just pause here of what I've done. So if you recall, when we first had this was a black background. The text was white, and the icon colors, the hamburger icon colors, were gray. So now I'm just, again, this is a styling thing. You don't have to do this, but if you ever need to, especially with a theme like Kadence, you do have really granular control about things you can change. So again, this is all I've done. I've made it the hamburger icon green, text is black. But the real thing I still want to do, the main thing I'm going to do is add a call to action button. So if you recall, I'll try this in a minute, is on the desktop version, we have this big donate button. We want to get donations from people. So on the mobile version right now, we don't have that. There's nothing there. So back to this header builder. Oops, let me go back here. Back to the header builder. If I want to add a call to action button, what I can do is I can drag this item, this is a Kadence thing, drag this down to my off canvas section. So now if I click on here, boom, I've got a button. So for the sake of time, I'm not going to super style this, but if I want to change this, I want to do a little bit of styling. I'm going to click on the gear for that button. And first off, the label, I don't want it to say button, I want to say donate, just like our other one did. There's no URL for now, so I'll just put in a placeholder, kind of a hashtag URL. And I'm not going to bother with, this will be extra credit for you just for the sake of time, but remember our desktop one has a thing where it's actually filled in, and you can style it to make it look like what the desktop one did. So unfortunately in Kadence, one thing I don't like is you can't copy these buttons between each other, because ultimately I would like, and I did, I'll fix it after after this session, I do want it to behave like this. I want it to be an empty button and then move my cursor over and fill it. But just for the sake of time, I don't think that's that important to show here live. But let me go back to this and see. So now ours is just gonna be a filled in button. It says donate. If I go to the gear, and size wise, that'll be the last thing I'll do. I'll change the size of this. I'm gonna make it, instead of medium, I'll make it large. So now it's looking, again, we're not going pixel for pixel to make things look exactly like this. You could do additional styling to put things like breaks in between the menu items. You'd have to do a little bit of trickery of CSS to make it actually fill the screen. That's not available right now, unfortunately, in Kadence, but we're closer. So that's where I'm going to leave it for now. So I'm going to publish this, and let's go back to, let's look at this again in, not the customizer. Let's look at our site again in a separate tab. And let's look at I'm going to inspect again. And now if we look at this in our phone view, again, our fake phone view, if you click on it, there we go, we have a big donate button. So that's it for styling. So the last pieces I did of the header made it sticky and added the mobile styling. Any questions? Don't ask me how to get back to some of those menu settings. Like Peter said, I think it's, and yeah, we're being real here. It's some of these settings you do have to play around with a little bit. Kadence has pretty good documentation too around how to find things, but for the most part, try things out, back things, if something doesn't work, if you're looking for setting, you can do undo, which is fairly common, and then eventually you'll find the setting that you need. All right, so
Ray,
yep, go ahead.
on the header, and I know this is sort of the first page, so we're not doing certain things, but I haven't in Kadence been able to find breadcrumbs, setting breadcrumbs for, people are laughing. Yeah, where is it?
I don't know if it exists in Kadence. I know that there's plugins that will do that for you. I use one that's like WP Nav or something, or some SEO plugins generally will do that for you as well. Yoast has an option to do that. SEO Press might as well. But I'm not, Peter, do you know, does Kadence itself have the breadcrumb navigation built into it? Peter,
You're on mute.
Yeah, or you're on mute.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm looking at that now. They do have it. I'm not sure if it's a pro feature.
I just saw header add-ons in here.
Yeah.
Ultimate menu, fixed element dividers.
Yeah.
Yeah, you might, Rice, you may want to check and see if it's, it might be available in the pro version of it, or again, since we're going the cheapskate route here of nothing paid, you may want to take a look at like a Yoast SEO plugin instead.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
I tell you what, Risa, I'll look too and see if I can't find anything specific, because I know breadcrumbs, honestly, it's something I don't use all that much, but I know it's important, especially if you get a site with a lot of sub.
it's big.
Yeah.
Bill, who's not on Bill's part of our group as well too. He's our SEO expert. Some of the project I've worked on with him, he highly encourages it, because I think there is a bit of SEO value.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
We'll look into it. Okay.
All right. So my finishing touches are done. How about yours for the hero section? Do you want me to go through your slide of?
Yeah, just real well. I'll tell you what. I'll take ownership.
Okay.
How's that? All right. You can have a breather, and of course, if anybody has any questions while I grab.
Oh, a short code. Stupid and short code. Kadence_breadcrumbs.
Ah. Well, there you go. You see the earth?
Yep.
Good. Okay. So. Whoop. All right. Finishing touches for the header. Then we're here for the hero section. So one of the things that we, of course, discovered, just as Ray was showing, was the fact that we were building for the desktop, primarily because it's kind of where we work in a lot, even though the world is mobile first yet, which is why, by the way, all the kind of the new WordPress themes a lot of times look kind of weird on the desktop, because they're really mobile first. So they kind of have a very wide, and you don't have the sidebars and things like that. But we're designing for all sites, and a lot of times we're starting with the place where we have the most design, because you scale things back a lot of cases for mobile. So one of the things that we noticed, and I will call this up right now, is that as we changed our screen size, and just do it, all of a sudden, like things kind of wrap weird. Our dog goes away and things like that. I also the inspector's one tool. I use another tool called Hoverify. This is a paid plugin, which also shows me kind of responsive screens, so I can see a number of resolutions, and I can see kind of what works and what doesn't work in mobile. Gives kind of that mobile view here. This on an iPad. So we recognize some of the things that we're missing. And by the way, there you go. This is the beauty of working on the same site live, Ray. Our menus and these all sync. It works. So look at that. Beautiful. So, and and anyone who was on the last call also might have seen me stumble a little bit in the area where I was adding on that home page. I was adding the hero section by putting in, this is a cover block with a background image, and putting 2 columns, headline, paragraph, and buttons, all core WordPress editor. But there's also, there's the spacer block, right? Because I wanted to give space and things like that. Well, one of the reasons why I was struggling a little bit was because I don't normally work this way. This is, there's a lot easier ways to do it, and there's a lot easier ways to do it. And the reason I kind of say it that way is, as we said, and we'll keep saying, there's 100 ways to do the same thing, and I'm going to show the way that I prefer for a lot of ways, but there's even other ways where we can do this even less steps, but unless you want to have to deconstruct things and all. So what I use is I use a tool called GeneratePress. A lot of times I use a theme called GeneratePress, but I use a plugin called Generate Blocks. And Generate Blocks is going to be the first plugin that we're going to install and turn on for this site. I've already got it installed. We'll turn it on. And what Generate Blocks does is, like many of the block packages out there, it has multiple blocks, but they only have 4. The Generate Blocks package only has 4 blocks in it, and it's all for layout. And what's great about these is these 4 blocks have a lot of options that allow you to have some pretty great control over the way you're laying out a section, a row, and you can build a lot of things from these 4 blocks. And those blocks are the container block, the grid block, the headline block, and the buttons block. Container, in one regard, replaces the cover block. It also replaces the column block, because the columns, containers were inside grids. Grids are kind of replaces the column blocks. I want 2 things next to each other. Headline replaces headings block. Now the headings block being core, what the headline block does is it gives you more options, more functions, including things like icons. And do you really want it to be an H2, H3, or maybe it's a div or a span or a paragraph? We'll have another talk one day all about accessibility and how, we don't want to misuse, your H2s and H3 tags, things like that. And then they have a button block that has more control, and buttons are one of the bigger frustrations in the core. There's a lot of work that's yet to be done in the editor, the block editor's button block. So I like the Generate Blocks plugin for all the value it gives me in just these 4 blocks. And it's free. It's on in the repository, WordPress.org blocks. You can get it right from the dashboard in WordPress. I'll show that real quick, but this is where you get the powers under typography, spacing, colors, gradients, backgrounds, the icons, and all, and how you can build things from that. All of this is built just using these 4 blocks. So the website is generateblocks.com. There is a premium version that offers a lot of kind of control and copy and paste, things like that. But it's a favorite of mine, so I'm sharing it because it's also a great starter, because again, only 4 blocks. So under plugins, as we know, I've deactivated just because I didn't want to get in the way of Ray, but as we all know, add new, maybe we don't know, plugins, add new, search, generate blocks. And then, I guess I did activate it. So Generate Blocks, you would install it if you didn't have it installed. Once it's installed, you would activate it. It would come deactivate, you would activate it. And now I have this one plugin. When you activate it, it kind of shows you this nice tutorial on what things are. You get the documentation and all. So I'll show you real quick why this is a favorite of mine, because I want to be aware of the clock here. I'll spend more time on this when we talk about the 3 section, even though it is the hero that took some more time. But I think I'll just drop in what I've created elsewhere and why this package, with its ability to manage responsive, have control, and you'll see the difference in just a minute. What I did was I rebuilt our hero section that we built in our last call, I rebuilt it in, got a test page back here. And on this test page, you close that. This is what we built before, cover block and all the things that we did, you know, with the background image, all core. This is the generate press using their container block, using their headline. I didn't change the buttons out and all, but what you'll see is the difference between, you know, if I click on my cover block here in WordPress core, I don't have all that many choices. You know, my background image, you know, the focus on, you know, where, you know, what's in that depending on the size of the screen, but I don't have a whole lot of control. In the, if I click on the container block, which is the generate press block, you can see now I've got a lot more control in terms of what's the typography I want to control within that container. How do I want to manage spacing, padding up and down and left and right? So where I had to put a spacer block in here, by using the cover block, I could put spacing just within the block itself, right? So, which is great because it gives me a lot of control over that. But where the real power is very similar to what we saw in Kadence. I can also control that for tablet and for mobile. Okay, so if you notice here what I've done, and we're not going to have time to get into all the details, but this top block again, this is what we created using core. This is a modified version using the generate press blocks, the container block. I used a grid instead of 2 columns. It's a 2-column. It's in effect a 2-column grid. But I have greater ability to manage the spacing. I can change, well, on my mobile version or my tablet version now, I want the padding. I don't want to spend all of that vertical space here that I did on my desktop version on a phone, because people don't need to see all of that, right? You know, managing the spacing of the dog in the background image, and you could spend all kinds of time. You could put a second image on the background and things like that, or change the spacing, say below this section here, this headline, and now say I'm using the headline, which gives me spacing below it. So say I wanted this to be 200, and now maybe try to make my dog fit within that space. There's a lot of ways to manage the details using these 4 blocks. So that's what I've done here, so that, and we'll spend more time on the specific blocks when we get into the next section.
Yeah.
But all I'm going to do right now is I'm going to cheat. I'm going to go to edit this. I'm going to grab this whole container, and remember how we can look at our blocks. We can either look at the breadcrumbs at the bottom of the screen, or at the top where we can see, okay, I'm now looking at the container. Inside the container is the grid. This grid gives me a container where I now have the headline, the paragraph, the buttons, which are this area here. I have a second container that has nothing in it. That's all selected here. If you got out of that and looked at you know, your whole page, these are all the blocks in it. So I'm going to grab this container with my edited content. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to come back to our home page, edit that. I'm going to paste that in here. Okay, so now this is our original. This is what I created today using, again, and like I said, my part 2, I'll get into some of the details of how to use the cover and the grid and things like that. And then let's just get rid of what we created. And now if I update this and I view the page, now our because of some of the settings I made and all with responsive. It's going to act a little nicer because the generate press container block, that it gives me all that control in the container itself, allows me to manage for the tablet and the mobile as specific and detailed as I want to get. So that was a real quick way that I fixed it by copying and pasting what I put some work into earlier. But we'll look at it a little bit more in a bit. But I'm curious if anybody's got some questions, or if they were running into some issues with placement and some of the things we might cover in a little bit.
And I think you'll see that more in a second when I do my part there. I'm going to show the hard way. So I think I'll demonstrate the problems of doing the native way. So I didn't say, so even the part that Peter just showed of like the final touches on the hero section, if you were following along with parts 1 and 2, you don't have to do this particular
Correct.
piece of, this is just for mobile. And again, we're trying to show you some of the different ways you can do this. So yeah, that part, again, I think as you follow along with the rest of the things step by step, don't worry about that last finishing touch piece.
Very good.
All right.
You want to take it back? You want to take a little bit of break and then see if there's any questions?
Yep. Let me grab the screen and I'll start explaining a bit of, and I'll try to keep mine to 15 minutes too. So let me talk real quick about what the next. So now we're finally getting to a new section. So far we were just fixing what we did last time, and we spent about an hour doing that. But again, this cleanup takes time. So here's our first new section, and this is what I'm calling like the 50-50 section. So again, if you go back to our sample site that we're building off of for inspiration, it has a section here which is 50-50. So half of it's a picture, half of it is text, headline and piece of text. But this is very common. You see this on sites all over the place. So seems simple. Must be simple to build, right? Well, kind of, or not so much. So what this thing is made up of is, as I said, there's an image on the left, there's a headline, and there's a paragraph. So that's what I'm going to build now, but again, for the animal shelter. So if I'm going to go to the website. We're going to go, and Peter, you're out of that page, right? You're on the home page.
I am. Yeah.
All right, cool.
No, I'm not.
No, you're fine. You're in the other one. You're in the test one.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Okay. So like I said, I'm going to do it kind of the harder way, but specifically, and again, I might stumble, so be prepared a little bit here, but I want to show a realistic, I think what most people will go through as you're trying to learn, Gutenberg or blocks or anything. And again, learning or stumbling a bit while you learn is fine. So here we go. So I need to first create I need to add something where I can have those two 50% columns. And luckily in WordPress, I'm going to add it below the hero image. I'm going to add a block. And I'm going to use all the native ones to begin with. So I'm not going to touch that plugin that Peter added so far. So the native block is called columns. And I know it's native because it's the thing that you'll see when you install a regular version of Gutenberg. So
yeah. And Ray, real quick.
Yep.
A lot of times you saw, like when you did the search, block groups that you're coming from plugins are usually color coded. Mm-hmm. And they're grouped when you go to add. So like if you go to add it and then you look at all, like Kadence, those 4 blocks are sitting there and the Kadence blocks are blue.
Right. Yeah. So we'll take the gray one here. So column. So far so good, right? It's going to be a 50-50 column. But one of the things I already know is that if you just even visually looking at this, I want this to be a full width columns. I don't want it to be boxed in the middle like it would be here. So one of the very first things I need to do is I need to change this to be full width. But here's where things get a little annoying from a Gutenberg standpoint. Right now, I'm highlighted on this one column. I want to change the width of what I would typically call a row in Gutenberg to navigate around to make you. So this is one thing too that's still a bit of a pain for me coming from a page builder world, is knowing where you are on this page. So I always jump around to the outline view quite a bit. So I want to be at the columns plural level, because now I can control both of those columns, not just an individual one. So when I'm at the columns level, all I did was go in here and highlight it. Now I can change the alignment of these two columns, and I'm going to click on this. I'm going to make it full width. So that's the very first thing, is making sure you're at the right spot and switching that over to a full width column. So let's start with the easy one on the left. So on the left, I'm going to start off again. I'm going to put in a headline and then some text, and I already have some sample text here. I'll copy for a second. So this is going to be our mission statement, or our mission section. So on the right, again, this is going to be on the right-hand side. So I'm going to add a block, and I'm going to make this a heading block because, if we were doing this as a real document, this is an H2, it's not the headline, but it's kind of a sub headline underneath our main one. So I'm going to say our mission. And then if you hit the enter key, now by default, it's going to add a paragraph block here, or this is what, if I paste some text in here. So I'm going to paste my text, and I copied it out of Word, so I'll be brave here. I'll paste. So if you look at it, so here we go. So we have the right-hand side says our mission, we're a nonprofit organization, blah, blah, blah. It's a mission statement for this organization. And on the left-hand side, what I want is, I want to put a picture in. So a picture that's appropriate. I don't want the picture of the kid in the swing like the other one. So Peter found a great picture that I'm going to add. So I'm going to go images, image. I've already uploaded this, so from my desktop, just to save some time, and I've resized it too. We weren't getting into image sizing. So in the media library, I already have this on our site. I have this image. Peter found this great dogs and cats playing together, and I resized. It's a great, just from a sizing standpoint. Again, this image originally was a huge, I forget what it was, like 2,000 width or something by, we don't need that. And this file size was quite large. So I scaled this. I actually went into photo editing tools. We talked about these in the past. And I reduced it down to like an 800 width by 471 pixels. No magic. I just picked 800 as a width. So anyway, I'm going to select that image. Oops, I got to move my Zoom window. Sorry. Zoom window's in my way. Get out of here, Zoom. Oh, sorry. Get up. There we go. Select. All right, that's better. Move my Zoom window back. All right, so if you look at this, all right, so we have, it's getting there. And in fact, I'll just update this right now just to show you where we are with this. So we've got an image on the left. We have our text on the right. So what does this page look like now? Does it look like what I want it to be like? Does it look like this, where the image is flush and everything is kind of designed properly like that? Not really. So problem number one. So problem number one is we've got this space in between these things. So I've got to eliminate the space. And just for the sake of time, in general, when I would look at this, I would try to figure out who has the extra space, because you don't know, like it could be this section or these rows could have padding on top. They could be bumping it, or the section above me could have space that is causing issues. So
yeah, hey Ray, I probably threw you a curveball. I think there's a margin at the bottom of the new hero section.
There is, and so. Yeah. And I'm not even going to use, so we probably could change this in the new section. I'm not going to do it that way, meaning I could probably change it in the settings. I'm going to show you the hard way, because I think again, if we left it alone, I think this is the way we would have done as well. So I need to remove this space, and I happen to know, and you can look at this too, as I'm hovering over my mouse, you can tell that some of the space is on the section above me. I'm going to go back to that. And see, here's another annoying thing. That section doesn't show up always in the list here.
Yeah.
So if I go back to this container, I'm going to add a class, because I'm going to do this again the more traditional manual way. I'm going to add a CSS class on here so I can get rid of that space. And I'm going to call this, what do I want to call this? Remove margin. And then I'm going to update this. So I've added a class, but I don't have any code yet in this class. So what am I doing? Now I need to actually put some CSS code into it. And again, I'm doing this the manual way. We'll see that there's easier ways to do this. But I'm going to go into my customizer. So one of the nice things about WordPress, if you're not familiar with it, is the the customizer, you can put CSS rules in here and it'll show you dynamically on this page you're looking at, it'll apply those rules. So I've added a class now called, what was it, dot, remove margin, I think is what I called it, I hope. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to set my margin bottom, hopefully this works, 0 pixels. There we go. As long as everything was aligning properly. So what was this magic that I did? I basically removed from this, the picture of the dog here, I've removed the margin. So in CSS, you either have margin or padding or just two different ways to kind of space elements from each other. I happen to know, because I did my homework, that it was the fact that this, by default, this thing that we created, that hero image, happened to have like 27 or 30 pixels of margin on the bottom, which normally makes sense. Normally you want space between your sections, but in this case, artistically, you know, we want this to be flush against it. So I had to add this code, the CSS code. And again, I'm doing this the harder way. Peter will show you, I think, later other ways to do this. So let me do that. So now I've published this. So that's step number one. I've removed the spacing. Now the other thing I want to do is this text is kind of stuck here at the top. I really want it to look more like this. I want it to be in the middle. Well, luckily that is easy to do inside of Gutenberg here. So if I go to, let me go back to my navigation, which again, sometimes the navigation thing is a pain. If I have to select this column, because I want to actually align everything in this column, all the text. I don't want to do each piece individually. I want everything to align vertically. So fortunately, they do have this. You know, when you select the column, I want to change my vertical alignment from being top aligned to middle aligned. So just with that, if I update that, let's go back. I'll get out of the customizer view just for now. And if I refresh my page, oh, actually, I think you can see right there. Now it's middle aligned. So that was a simple thing to do to make it align in the middle. All right, a couple more quick ones. The next thing I want to do is the text. As you can see, the text here, because it's full width, because everything is full width, the text doesn't exactly, it's not easy to read, because this text is basically going all the way, it's wrapping, remember, it's going as far as it can to the end of the screen. Well, I want it to look a little bit more like this. I want that text to be flush. You know, I want it to be not going to the end of the screen. I want it to maybe be, I don't know, let's say 50%-ish, I don't know, 60% of that column width. So there's a couple of ways you would think you can do this. Now I'm going to quickly show you the wrong way to do it, because that's how we learn, doing things the wrong way. So the wrong way to do this would be, if I went to this column, you would think column width. Hey, there's a property I can set. Well, the problem is, if I want to change that, let's say to 60%, the problem is it affects the width of the entire row. So it's now saying my right column is 60, thus my left column must be 40. That's not what I want. You know, I just want to have this piece of text getting reduced. So don't, you know, again, delete. You can always undo. The undo button's a good thing. So just thinking through this problem a bit, because this is kind of what I went through as I was prepping. What I really want is, I don't want the column to be 60%. I want this paragraph, this block of text to be 60%, let's say. Well, again, here's the problem. The default WordPress block for paragraphs doesn't give you much styling at all, like almost nothing. It gives you font size, line height, nothing. So once again, we've got to resort to CSS. So again, this is the hard way to do it. So I'm going to say, let's say I'm going to do it 50%. So I need to add a class first. So my real quick rule of thumb on CSS, again, this may be a little bit of an advanced topic, is in general, when I try to create CSS rules for sites I work on, I'm always thinking of reuse. So I try to create ideally small sized CSS rules, because then I could reuse them at other places throughout the site. I don't want to make my CSS rules so specific to this one problem I'm solving that it's only good for one problem. So that's just kind of my mindset as I'm doing CSS. So in this case, I'm going to call it something generic then, like let's call it, I'm going to call it half width. So that's the name of my class. I haven't coded anything yet, so you can call this anything you like. I'm just gonna call it half width to begin with. And then I'm gonna update my page. And now let's view the page. So at this point, nothing has changed, right? Now I need to add a rule to that CSS class. So let's go back into the customizer again. I need to open up the CSS. And now I need to add a rule. So again, we don't have a lot of time to show you how CSS works, but basically the structure is you add like a period. If I'm selecting a class, you put in your class name, I call it half width, and you put your rules in brackets, in these squiggly brackets. So what I want to do, what this is going to do is it's going to target that class, the half width class. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a CSS property width, and I'm going to say 50%. And 50 maybe doesn't look so good. Let's do, I don't call it half width. Let's bear with me. I'll say 55%. And I put in my semicolon. So if I publish this now, and let's look at, let me get out of the customizer. Let's look at this one more time and see what does this look like now. So there we go. It's a bit better. So now what this has done is this has turned this into 55%, but it doesn't affect the size of the two columns next to each other side by side. Now I'm going to stop there. So again, look at what I was trying to do. So here's our sample. Let's not worry about the fonts at this point, but it's gotten close to what we're trying to do from our sample layout. We have a 50% image, 50% headline and text on the side, and here we are. We're in a similar situation. Oh, let me refresh my screen. Sorry. There we go. That's what we look like. So that was a hard way to do it.
Yeah.
But I'm sure everything I've shown, the reason I went through that example is not just to show you a hard way, is that's today, that is how WordPress, using just Gutenberg without a single plugin, that's how you would have to do something like this. And those of us who've come from the page builder world, again, I'm a Divi guy. One of the things that page builders aren't magic. What they generally do is they expose these CSS properties to you on within your user interface. So you don't have to write CSS yourself like I did. You just get to manipulate these settings and you see it on the fly. So any questions about what I built, how I built this section, how, why?
There was a question about that very thing of how much spacing control is in columns. Pretty much none, which is why you're writing CSS.
And that's why I think that the plugin that Peter showed and is going to continue to build out with, that's why those plugins are still to this day, as much as it's not a page builder, but Gutenberg as of 5.7, whatever number we're on right now, it still, in my opinion, does not give you enough control within the UI to be able to do some of these things that you need to. You still have to jump out to CSS today to do some of these things. And one last pet peeve, and then I'll hand the floor back to Peter to finish the next section, is another thing I really don't like, and again, this is my Divi bias perhaps, I still don't like the fact that if I edit the page, I'm still not seeing a true one-for-one match between what I'm seeing here on the editor's side and what my page looks like. So this, to me, again, this is an old world of old versions of Divi or Elementor. I have to flip back and forth because this does not look like my front end.
Right.
So anyway, so again, Peter and I, we're both here on a WordPress meetup group. I'm happy to say when I think WordPress itself is still deficient. And to me, this is still something very deficient in WordPress as it is right now.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's why the Gutenberg plugin, which by the way, always remind the Gutenberg plugin is basically a beta for what's coming. So when people talk about, well, I hate Gutenberg versus the block editor, which is what's in core, it has a long way to go. Everybody knows it. There's been a long time debate. The valuable thing is all of this stuff can work together too, right? So you can have a page builder, but still use the block editor just for doing blog posts and things like that. So a lot of these things work together. I think so. That's important. All right, so let me take over. Sorry to yell. Let me take over the screen again. There we go. I don't want to have that over there. You see the
Yep.
PowerPoint again? Okay, great. and we were over building the blurb section or whatever. Ray calls it the blurb. I'm not sure what I call it. The three feature section, the section that we often see on a lot of sites. And in our example, I'll bring that up in a second. But that's what we're going to be working on. Now I'm going to be using the Generate Blocks plugin mostly, and you'll see why, especially based on what Ray just did. But here's if I can get my mouse back, there it is. Here's kind of the layout of this page, right? So this three section that we're seeing on our demo site, this is just a screen capture of it, but you've got basically a headline, and then headline text or paragraph, and I'll show you why I'm kind of differentiating because of something that Generate Blocks gives us, makes available to us. A grid that has three containers, three columns, if you will, but in the Generate Blocks, this gray area is a container, as I indicate here, but these are also containers within a grid. You've got headlines where you can add icons. There's a paragraph and then a button. So that's basically the layout of the page that we're emulating. What's that?
And just to jump in for a second too, because
Yeah,
I think this is something too, especially as a beginner. I certainly never thought this way until I've built many websites. But over time, you do start to see websites like this, like how Peter has it laid out and how I did. You start to see the pieces of a site and the components of the site, and that takes some time. But I know when I was a very beginner, I would look at a section like this and I wouldn't have a clue how to start it. I would just start from top to bottom basically, and then revisit and revise. But I think if you're a beginner, get into this habit of stopping, maybe looking at a section of a site, draw it. That helped me a lot too. Draw things on a piece of paper and think about the different components that go into it, because when you're constructing it, that's kind of the way you're going to build it, or that's a much better way to build it than just starting top to bottom and then not planning things out. So I just want to throw that in there.
Oh, that's great. And you just saw me edit the slide live because if you're looking at it, the container is the outer thing and it's worked down. So if I was going to be a little bit more accurate, I would do it kind of in that order. So let's go do it. Let's see if we can do it in the time that we've got. What I'm going to do now is open our guy here. Let's refresh it. Let's edit it. Let me close this so I'm not running into anything. Let me close this. Okay. All right. So by the way, one of the first things I would do now, I put a what Ray just did, where he did the margin is 0. If I grab this container, right? So I'm looking at this top container here. The under spacing, margin bottom, you just make that 0. So
you got rid of my CSS.
Yes, that's right. Well, now they're both in play. But yeah, that's kind of what's nice about the Generate Blocks world, where you have the padding, the margin, the border size, and on. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to start by adding a container. Okay. So this container is going to be that gray box. I can kind of go back and forth, but that gray box. So what I'll do is I'm highlighting the container, and I'm going to go under, I have this option now for colors, the background color. Let me go to our palette and let me pull that gray color. Now here's something interesting with the width, just as we were just discussing. So under width, the container, we can make, I'm sorry, the container is full width, and the inner container can be contained with. And what this does is this gives us the option of, actually what I have to do, let me do it over here, because this is where the container is full width.
Yeah.
Then the inner container is a contained width. This kind of is the equivalent, Ray, of what you had where you had this margin here.
Right.
Where now what's a little bit different with Generate Blocks is that container gives you an option for setting that inside size. Now I already have my gray container here with nothing in it. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add and I'm going to use the generate blocks headline because it gives me a little bit more power. And I'm going to, let me come over here, and I've got some text that I used over here. And I'm going to say, make a difference. Okay, so the option here is I can align center it. And that is my headline. Now, again, if you look over here, instead of just the headline and those that H1, H2, 3, I can control typography, spacing, colors, icon, which I'll get to in a minute. But right now I'm just putting that that headline, which is the equivalent of our focus. Let's make a difference. All right. So now below that, now I could make this second section here a paragraph, or actually what I like to do, only because it gives me a little bit more control over it, is with generate block, I can add another headline. Oops. This is a funny thing because I can actually hit enter. I'm going to do it here. I hit enter and I actually saw it in the. It saw it as a carriage return within that headline. I'm going to add another headline, and I'm going to put my text. This is just some text that I wrote up. Now it's defaulting to H2 left justified. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change this now to a div. And the only reason I'm doing that is because sometimes with paragraphs you get that carriage return at the end where you get spacing where you don't have a whole lot of control. I'm also going to center it, align. So this is, well, even though this is a generate blocks headline, I'm telling it headline is the block type. It doesn't mean it's a heading because I've told it, no, make this just a div. A div being, I've got some text. It's not a headline. It's not a paragraph. It's an HTML, without getting too detailed, that is a section of text. Now what I can do is under the, if I go under the details for that block, so I'm now in, again, the headline block, my second headline block. I can set the, if I go to advanced typography, I could change all of this. I don't really want to change all. Maybe I just want to make this a smaller size. I don't know, 14, 15, a 15 pixel size font. So now I've got that text underneath. If we preview this, okay, that's all I've got so far.
And Peter, actually,
yep.
So when you went to preview mode, now you bring up, Mike had a question in the chat about, so there's still a gap
yep.
now between my section, the 50/50, and your section.
Yep. So what I can do here is I'll go back to the container. And again, you can do that a couple ways. And by the way, I don't know if you know this trick. If you go to what the block detail is, it'll pop up its parent container. So that's a neat way to just go one block up, if you will. So now I'm highlighting that. If I go to spacing, and if I go to margin, I can force it to be top of 0 and bottom of 0. And let's preview that. Let's see if that. I don't know if you have, do you have spacing under here too? Yeah. We'll have to look at that. That's an example as if that was done using a container and they're both set to 0, they'd be flush with each other. So you're right. I haven't adjusted for what the spacing is below that block. So
that'll be our finishing touch, Mike, next time.
What's that?
Is it, Mike? That'll be our finishing touch of our 50/50 section next time.
Right. Okay. So now what we want to do is, so far I just have this section and this section. And maybe I want to really quickly come here, and if I wanted to change the spacing of this, okay, so now I'm highlighting that, I go to spacing. I mean, I can change the margin of just this section to be, say I wanted it 50, and now that's space. Not that I want that, but this is, again, where you can get really a lot of control over it. The block below this now is going to be I'm going to add a block, and I'm going to add a grid, and I'm going to add 3, because remember we've got 3 columns. And now I have these 3 containers. The way Generate Blocks works is instead of columns, it's basically a container. Now there's 3 containers next to each other, and by default, each container is 33% wide on the default. And you have, when I go to each container, I could change the percentage. I could make the first 2 25%, 25%, 50%, and so on. But right now I have these 3 empty containers. There's nothing in them. So what I want to do, and I'm going to do this thing where I'm going to manage each. I'm going to do one example, copy it, and then we can edit it. So I'm not sure if we're going to have enough time for that, but we'll do this. So now the first thing I'm going to do is in this container. So I have, again, this container. This is a container within this master container. The container is the column within the grid, if you will. So if I go into there and I want to add a block and I want to add a headline, and I'm going to add a headline called adoption. Okay, and I'm going to center that. And maybe I do want this to be a kind of heading, and we'll call it H3 because maybe it's considered in terms of accessibility, you know, its own section. But here's where one of the first things that gets kind of interesting. If I'm in this heading, I can go to icon, and I can say, I can put an icon in here now. Here's the icons that are just kind of in the Generate Blocks library, pretty basic, and there's a reason for that. But I could say I want that icon, and the icon is going to be above. Okay, so now we're simulating this, right? So here's my headline, but now that headline block actually comes with a handy dandy icon already kind of built into it. And then I'm going to do something kind of interesting, which is, I want to do this very quickly. I downloaded some icons in SVG format. We'll probably spend more time on this.
We can provide
the thing about it is, what's that?
And we can provide those icons as resources too to folks who are following.
Yeah, we'll share those. But I'm over on my side screen here. I'm copying this, and if I come over to, I've got a little text editor, and the SVG file will look something like this. All those that's a bunch of numbers drawing out a picture. So I took that. If I take that, you can go right into this headline. Under my icon, I can put in that actual code, and there's that icon SVG file drew a dog. So that little guy there is made from this code here, and then the one thing I want to do is change the icon size. Right now it's set to M's, which, you know, I can change it to pixels, and then change the size. Maybe I want it, you know, 50 or 60. So we can go. We'll put this in the links where you can go grab icons, grab the text, and drop literally that code. So whatever SVG code that you can get. But now we've got an icon, and then that headline, and we can control the padding too, right? So if we want a little bit closer or further away, again, this is now done in M's. I'm going to change it to pixels. I'm going to make that, you know, 20. Okay, so now I've got my headline. I'll make it 10. Okay, so what else do we have here real quick? We've got, now we've got a paragraph. Okay, go ahead, Ray, jump in.
No, so I gave you the paragraph, yep.
So now we've got a paragraph. So I'm going to add my paragraph block. Let me grab some text over here. This is actually something called Kitty Lorem, I think. So, and in here we can set in the paragraph, if I do want to change the text to custom, I can do that. So let's say we do this. I'm just changing the font. So now I've got this. We'll preview this. Okay, so now I have this one block. We'll make a couple more changes, and then you'll see how this kind of all comes together. So the next thing I want to do is give it a white background. Now that white background is a function of that container, or is attached to that container. So if I go to that paragraph, outside of that, this whole container is something where I can set, again, generate blocks gives me the option of colors. I can set the background color to white, for example. I can also set, and this is one thing where there's, in the premium version, you can cut and paste a lot of this stuff too. Once you start doing it, I can also set the that container's spacing, where now I could put a left and right margin. Say I want to give a margin between my columns, if you will. Maybe I want my padding on the inside, the white section here. I want my right side padding here to go in, so the text doesn't run into it, in by 10. And then if our example had some pretty significant padding top and bottom in that rectangle there. Okay, so now what I've got is I've got this one container that has this section here, right, with the headline and the paragraph. That container, that column, has a white grid. So what I want to do is I'm just going to replicate for the 3 columns the same color and spacing. If I can remember what I did for the spacing, this real quick. So do this. Again, pro version, you can copy and paste this just through.
I was going to ask you that, Peter. Yeah, so you can't do it in the free version. Okay.
Yeah. I could replicate the columns, but I wanted to show how the columns kind of work by putting the grid of 3. What I do, 10 and 40, I think.
Yeah. Right.
Make sure that you use bottom for bottom and top and left. 10. Real quick, so then what I can then do is grab these, copy this, come over here. Oops. This is the type of thing that does. This is what I typically do is this, not what I copy and paste. I'll take these, I will group them.
Yeah.
I will highlight that group will be highlighted. I will duplicate it. So now within the same column, now I can take this whole group and kind of page builder style, drop it in there.
Could you have also added that to a reusable block?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I could have saved that as a block, but now say I want this one to be, now I could just edit this separate, right? So I can make this be Foster, and I can make this guy, and I'll do this real quick because I just happen to have the code over here. I'm going to go to my icon, and I'm going to go to that icon text. I'm going to put in the code for a cat instead of, we could change that. And I could do that same process for the third thing, which we'll come back to. I'm trying to be really close on the time, but I'm going to add a block now below the grid. I'm going to add a new block, and I'm going to make that a button. I'm going to use the blue, in this case, the generate press buttons, because I am replicating the learn more. I'm going to say learn more, right? So now this is the generate press version of buttons. Again, if it's looking for multiple buttons if I want, if I hover over, I can grab the thing that's above it. I'm going to center that, align all the buttons center. I'm going to go to my spacing, and I'm going to give a top margin of 40, a bottom margin of 40, highlight that, go to my colors, my background color. I'm actually going to I'm going to set that to transparent. If I, in this case, emulating again this, right? So the learn more. Then what I'm going to do while I'm looking at the buttons, I've set the background color. I'm going to set the border color to our green. We don't see it yet. And I'm going to set the text color also to green. But I have to go up to spacing where we also have the border size. And just say it's 2 pixels wide. Draw the nice box around there. And maybe if I did want a little bit of a roundness to that. Now I have this learn more button. We didn't do the third column yet, but it's kind of that same process.
That's homework for people to do after.
Yeah, there you go. Including, and we could change the background color, but this is where, and I'll look at this and that spacing not right, but this is where, excuse me, that you can see how much is built into these simple blocks that now give you a lot more control over what you're putting on the page and how you're putting the page. It's a lot, but you can see how quickly we kind of built this section.
Not a single line of CSS.
Not a single line of CSS. That's right. I forgot how to write CSS. But yeah, it's those 4 blocks allow you to build what you'll see in other. This is kind of my takeaway on this too. Is like there's a lot of block packages, and in fact, at one point we'll introduce Kadence. The theme also has a really nice package for blocks that I use, but they'll have all of this pre-built. With parameters that you set, but you might not. You might actually have to do, like I dropped one in and then I was deconstructing it more than I was constructing it. Or this way, at least you get an idea that when you want to do something your own, you can see the components that make up the thing versus having this whole library of blocks that are just slight variations of the same thing. You know, oh, this is an icon with a heading. This is a, you know. With generate blocks, we've got these 4 that allow us to do something. You can tell I'm a proponent of it because it saved me a lot of time. We'll also edit this. One of the things with the containers, I could tell it. See how this the spacing here needs to be changed because this is actually wider than I can see. But I don't know. We're up against time like usual. So any questions? Do you want me to go? Well, I don't think there's time to go further. But
Yeah,
what do you think?
I'd stop there. I mean, part of this too, and I think Peter was emphasizing this too, is that we're showing you this kind of by scratch. That's the intent of this, like these sessions. But we don't want to scare away people from WordPress either. That there are themes and plugins that make this a lot easier, as Peter was saying. Like Kadence has, and WordPress also has a bit of these like block patterns for common things like that. So the 50-51, or like having a blurb, what I call a blurb. And that's a very common thing you see on websites. So it just makes sense that you don't want to create that. Everyone doesn't need to create that from scratch. So there are solutions out there for it, but we want to show you that you don't need those solutions necessarily, or just show you kind of what's behind those solutions. So it's, again, we're doing some of this very manual intentionally, but don't be scared off necessarily by that.
Yeah.
So let me go back to just real quick a wrap up thing. We'll have a minute or so left. So what's coming up next? So as I said, next month, first off, we're going to take a break from this project a little bit because we're going to talk about WordPress 5.8 and look at all the features that are coming out there. But hopefully this discussion tonight, we're looking at some of these things in terms of what we're building here. And was there anything we did tonight that, new features coming out in the new version of WordPress that could help with our project? So I think we'll try to at least tie it together with some practical, practical hands-on usage. But where we're going to go when we do restart this up again, probably the following month, we'll finish off the home page. I think we'll finish off that section a bit, or maybe that section, it's not worth doing as a group. People can do that on their own. We may have one more section below it. I don't remember. Well, actually, I do know. I'm sorry. So we still need to do the footer at some point. We built the header. The footer is not that much different than a header. But the next section we're going to build is an interesting section. Peter and I kind of talked about this amongst ourselves. We're thinking about a section that doesn't really exist on the sample site, but we're thinking of a section that will display adoptable pets or available pets. So, if you think about what that will look like, it's likely going to be a picture of the pet, some brief info about the pet, etc. And then ideally when somebody clicks on that, they'll then go to a page that shows you the details of that pet. Well, what that really is on any WordPress site is that's typically a combination of custom fields and a custom post type. So it's a big topic. We haven't really talked about this before in any of our meetup events. I've wanted to do it for quite a while, but this is a perfect opportunity to do that. So we're probably going to spend almost an entire session talking about what are custom post types, what are custom fields, how do they work together, but also applying that to a practical example of the pets. Again, we'll build this thing for adoptable pets, but you can think about this idea for anything that you may want to add to your site. So that's gonna be a huge topic. I think that's, like I said, we're gonna cover that in most of part 4. So we only have a couple of minutes left for open questions, but hopefully this is making some sense to people. I do, again, I kind of laugh as I'm struggling with finding things sometimes in these, the different themes and the different modules. But we want to be transparent. Like Peter said, sometimes you can watch a YouTube video someplace and they're not making any mistakes. Well, this is unvarnished. You'll see us make mistakes because we want you to feel as you're following along, you're going to make mistakes, and again, on a project like this, it's a safe place to make mistakes. So, we highly encourage you to follow along afterwards, once we send out the link to the recording on the YouTube page. And when you run into problems, go to the Facebook page, bring it up there because everyone's going to learn from that too. I think that's a key thing. Gutenberg itself, it's new, it still keeps changing all the time. Yeah. So that's, purpose of this group, purpose of this demo that we're doing is really to help learn together and show you things that we've learned already. So any final thoughts or questions from folks?
I have a question.
Sure.
So is a div and a container the same thing?
A div in a container? So, well, in our discussion tonight, the container was a very specific block that ultimately, if you looked at the HTML code behind it, divs are part of it. In HTML, the div tag is basically something that sets off a section of content, whether that be words, buttons, things like that. So no, they're not the same thing, although you can think about them sort of in a way, but one's HTML code, div. So in the example that I gave where I was showing the headline, ultimately, if you went out to the page, looked at the code behind it, instead of it being, say, wrapped in 2 paragraph tags, it was wrapped now in 2 div tags, which then was telling, the browser, this isn't paragraph text. This is specific text that I'm now going to style in a way that I'm telling you, but it's not paragraph. It's just copy. Ray, did I explain that halfway correctly? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think the container, and this one gets a little confusing. Container is the generate blocks term, but it's also such a generic term that it's used differently depending on the context of it. So
correct. Yeah, in HTML you might say, well, the div, that's the container for, so it's the same words being used multiple ways. And wait until we get into the whole discussion about widgets. So.
Rice had a question about the containers that you built. Can the whole container be a link to another page, or is it preferable to use a button? I mean, I've seen it both ways. I mean, I've seen you can click on sections like the blurb sections. You can make those a link to a page. Sometimes it's not intuitive. I think people a lot of times are expecting a button to be the hyperlink to something. If you do something like that for a section, then you do want to have some kind of visual thing, like if you hover your mouse over it, the section lights up or has borders, or the borders suddenly become active. But again, I always say too that especially these days, you got to consider mobile. So all these things about hovering your mouse over things doesn't work in mobile.
Yeah. Yeah, specific to the blocks I showed tonight, I don't know if that's in the free version. I will confirm that. In that, can you grab a full container, make that full container a link just with block settings versus HTML or whatever.
Well, I know we're kind of out of time, so thanks everyone for sticking with us. Again, if you missed things, if things flew over your head, that's what the recording is for. Go back and watch those pieces. And again, like I said, I highly encourage you. You don't have to build everything that we're building, but try some of this. And
Yeah.
if you fumble and stumble, that's okay.
Yeah.
You know, do it
Yeah.
on your test site. You know, that's the place to do it. But you'll learn a lot from it too, I think.
Yeah, we'll send out, as Ray does, great following up in Facebook and all, and I'm going to build out the Hartford WP page with more details, including the links to the icons and more detail on some of these columns and containers and things like that.
And the link to that lorem ipsum that has the cat stuff.
Yeah, there you go. We'll do that.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. Have a good night. We'll see
Great
you again
session.
next month.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.